Welcome to Behind the Curtain, where we discuss everything from aliens and conspiracies to ancient civilizations and religions, all from a biblical perspective.
Good afternoon.
Hello there!
Josh, what's wrong with your face? Oh no, what have you done?
Joss is no longer here. Oh, we are going to talk about something fun today.
Yeah, it's that time of year.
It's that time of year. It's the most wonderful time of year.
Hey, for some people it is.
Yeah,
man.
it truly
There are some
is.
people
Yeah,
that
for all you
love-
pagans out there, hope you enjoy your holiday.
Oh, there are some Christians that like it too.
True, yeah.
But yeah, we are going to talk about Halloween today. And not just Halloween, we're going to cover like the history of Halloween. I'll say it this way: the
As
supposed,
much as we could gather, yeah.
the alleged history of Halloween.
Right, yeah, the theories.
And we're going to talk about some religious stuff, like spiritual stuff that's associated with it. And true to our brand, it's going to tie back to Genesis 6. We can't not bring that up.
It wouldn't be a proper episode without referencing the giants.
And then we'll discuss some practical stuff towards the end, I think, because everybody, I know the big question in everybody's mind is, it's a day for me to get free candy, so is that okay? Can I do that without worshiping demons?
Yeah.
All I wanted was a Reese's cup, and I went to hell over it.
I just wanted to get out the house and play with my kids and get some candy.
It's, not worth, is that Reese's cup worth your soul?
Well, we're going to tell you about how all that's evil, so just stay tuned.
Yeah. No, we're going to stay very, all joking aside, we're going to stay very, I think, neutral on it. Just try to provide some information for people to make their own good decisions. Sure. And the ultimate rule, as with anything, any similar topic, is follow your conscience.
Right.
You know, Paul talks about that in Romans. Don't violate your own conscience. Don't violate others' conscience.
Yep.
You know, that something that might cause other people to stumble. So
yep.
You do what the Lord leads you to do. But yeah, we'll get into some practical and some fantasy stuff today. Mm-hmm. I hate using the word fantasy, though.
So-called fantasy.
Yeah, some mythical stuff. Mythical stuff.
There you go.
So, right down in the very beginning, this time of year on the calendar, it's very interesting. So Halloween, as we know it, in my research, it seems like it mostly came about as pushed mostly by Catholics.
Yeah.
You know, I'm sure a lot of you are familiar that it was originally known as like All Hallows Tide or something. It's like the days October 31st through November 2nd or 3rd or something. October 31st, where we get the word Halloween, of course, is Hallows Eve. That's hallow with an A, not hollow.
Hallows, yeah.
And so
just think of a Dutch person saying hello.
Hello.
Hallo.
But it means holy.
Right, yeah, it means holy. It means sacred.
Think about in the King James Version, the Lord's Prayer.
Hallowed be thy name.
Yeah.
Yep, exactly.
So it means holy. And it's the eve of All Saints' Day, November 1st. So Hallows Eve.
The night before Holy Day.
Yeah.
Yep.
So do we want to start by talking about All Saints' Day and the Catholic tradition, or do you want to?
Yeah, we can.
Okay.
Or we could go further back in time.
Well, let's start with the Catholic tradition.
Cool.
Which this is going to be fun because Josh and I never once in our lives have been Catholic, so this is all just from research and talking to people.
Right.
But yeah, All Saints' Day is November 1st.
Right.
And the idea is that we remember those. I say we, Catholics. Mm-hmm. Catholics remember those who have died and gone to heaven. Yep. There are a lot of people in the Catholic tradition who have been sainted. You know, Saint Augustine,
all those saint guys.
Augustine,
yeah.
Augustine.
Yeah.
Anyway, yeah. There's
Saint Nicholas.
Saint Nicholas.
It's another holiday.
So there's a lot of people who are recognized saints, and they're recognized by certain festivals or feasts or, you know, whatever, calendar days. But the generic idea of a saint is someone who has died and joined Christ in the afterlife in holiness and in so it's a day to remember all the saints, not just the ones that are recognized on the calendar, because there's a lot of people that die that are saints that maybe you don't know about, right?
Yeah.
And so it's just a day to remember everyone who has basically died and gone to heaven, and especially those that you were connected to, your family members. But yeah, it's like there are calendar days in the Catholic tradition that they recognize certain saints, and November 1st is kind of the catch-all. Like, in case we forgot anybody, we pray and remember them on All Saints Day on November 1st.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of our modern day holidays are centered around that idea. St. Valentine's Day.
Right.
You have Christmas and St. Nick and the things that he did, and also with Jesus, of course.
St. Patrick.
St. Patrick, yeah. All of these days are Catholic in nature.
Yeah, and
which are great. I love all of them.
When we get into the again, I'll say alleged or supposed Celtic origins of the holiday, there are multiple Celtic or pagan, whatever route you want to go. But there's several ancient holidays that are just based on solar periods, like calendar periods.
Yeah.
And as we'll discuss, when Christians move in to evangelize these groups, they replace them. So like there's one in the spring too that they turn into a celebration for a particular saint, and then there's one in the summer, and so each of those gets recognized with a Catholic feast, recognizing a saint. So anyway, November 1st, All Saints Day, is just the catch-all. It's kind of like having the unmarked grave for the soldiers, right? Like these are people that we don't know, that weren't identified, but we want to honor them. So
nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
I mean, in Protestantism, we think about things. It's kind of funny that October 31st is also Reformation Day.
Oh.
The day that Martin Luther nailed his thesis to the door in Wittenberg, and unbewittingly, unbeknownst to him, kickstarted a whole revolution. But
the Protestants that again, as we'll discuss in a little bit, kind of tried to shut down Halloween.
They tried to shut down a lot of stuff.
But November 2nd though is the one that was odd to me, and it is All Souls Day. And so if All Saints Day, remember saints are people that have died and gone to heaven and are joined with Christ.
Those are like the VIP guys.
Right. So All Souls Day are people who have died and are in purgatory. And so again, that's a Catholic tradition, like where we come from a Protestant tradition, so we don't, necessarily, that's not even the correct way to say it. Absolutely don't believe in purgatory.
Right, yeah.
That's a whole nother discussion.
I think we understand the idea.
Yeah.
But definitely don't hold
and we've mentioned that a little bit in previous episodes.
Definitely.
But one day we can do a deep dive into some of those things. That'd be cool.
Yeah.
But there are people who have died in the Catholic belief that they've died and they don't go straight to heaven and they don't go straight to hell. Their spirits need to be purified so that they are fit for heaven.
Yeah, they had a few problems that need to be worked out.
Right. And so they are recognized on All Souls Day, November 2nd. And so people pray and in some cases make offerings to basically get those people out of purgatory faster.
Yeah.
They are depending on the prayers of their relatives and friends to get out of, or I guess Catholic, people who believe that in general,
to get out of purgatory. A coin in the coffer rings, a soul from purgatory springs.
Yeah. But that is that festival. Like they have Halloween, October 31st. They have All Saints Day on November 1st, and All Souls Day on November 2nd. And so that is the Catholic tradition. Now, where we get sketchy, I'll say when we're talking about the history of what we recognize today as Halloween tradition.
Right, the traditions.
Like trick-or-treating, jack-o'-lanterns, dressing up in costumes, parties.
Right.
That's where it starts to get kind of gray because there's a debate, an ongoing debate.
And then just the overall feel of like death.
Yeah, the death.
And the dead.
And remembering the dead, honoring the dead. There's a lot of debate over whether it was originally a Christian Catholic thing or a Celtic pagan thing.
Yeah.
And I think it depends on who you ask. Like if you ask a Catholic, they're going to defend the Catholic tradition. They're going to say, no, we started this this feast, and in the modern era, people try to take it back and say, oh, it's actually pagan.
Yeah.
So and that would discredit the Catholic tradition, as well as give some validity to pagan traditions.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of people saying no. Like I said, if you ask a Catholic, they're going to defend their side. They're going to say, no, it's a Catholic thing through and through, and people who recognize pagans are trying to bring back some Celtic traditions or whatever.
Yeah.
They're essentially retconning the origins of Halloween. Whereas if you ask somebody who's not Catholic, literally anyone who's not Catholic, they're going to say, oh yeah, it was absolutely a Irish, Celtic, or pagan thing that the Catholics appropriated to evangelize Ireland and Scotland and, the British Isles, stuff like that. So I will say, in researching it, I'm not sure which is true. I think there's evidence on both sides.
Yeah, I think it's probably a both and.
Yeah.
I think I lean more toward a pre-Christian. As far as our traditions in modern day, I would lean more toward a pre-Christian origin in some nature.
Well,
I think it's a mishmash of other, religions and stuff.
The thing that we're famous for saying on this show is it can be both, right?
Right.
So there are clear evidences that this day was significant to people around the world.
To everyone, probably.
Yeah. So, it could just be mere coincidence. The appropriation idea that like Catholics stole a holiday from pagans in order to convert all these people. I think people tell that like it's malicious, like, oh, they're robbing them of their culture and stuff.
Yeah.
But as a Christian, I understand the need to evangelize and that would be like 100 years. Like what if 4th of July, we celebrate America and, independence and all that. If there were some sort of demonic cultish behavior associated with 4th of July, like if we were sacrificing pigs. Hey,
debauchery.
That's for a future episode. the secret origins of the 4th of July.
The Illuminati 4th.
Right.
The 4th Illuminati.
But think about it, like if it were a custom to go and like sacrifice or something for 4th of July, and as a Christian, I would say, I'm not going to do that. Maybe I can teach my kids.
Let's turn our attention elsewhere.
Yes. Yeah. So I say, this is already an established holiday.
Right.
And I want to teach people about Christ, so let me like you said, redirect your attention.
Right. It's not it is kind of a diminishing of what's happening, but it's like, let's take that enthusiasm and point it towards something positive.
But we still do this, so let's step back from Halloween for a second.
We do that
now. Yeah, let's step back from the Halloween discussion and just say, like, we started out in our first or second episode talking about Apostle Paul going into Athens and saying, like, look at all your idols. And let me tell you about the one who created all these gods and created the world and stuff. So like Paul uses that strategy. Yeah. He said, I'm all things to all people so that they might know Christ, right? So Paul tried to get on people's level. Yeah. And today, like there are people who use, like we might use superhero movies to teach use as symbols for like sacrifice and generosity and putting others first and the need for a savior. And so like we still do this today. We appropriate stories and traditions to teach Christ. So I'll be honest, I think a lot of people that the whole like, oh, that's not a Catholic thing or that's not a Christian thing, it's pagan. Haha, y'all are actually celebrating a pagan thing. And they think it's malicious, maybe even that Catholics did that, right? Set up a feast on that day. I would say from the Christian perspective, I can see why that's a good thing. Yeah. They're trying to evangelize and convert people. Right.
Well, it's a matter of perspective. If you're a Christian, obviously that's going to be a positive thing for you. If you're not a Christian, it's going to be a negative thing. Yes. Oh, they're trying to take my heritage or my culture or my religion away.
Yeah. So anyway, that's kind of a dichotomy that, that's kind of a story that doesn't really get logically thought through a lot, I think. People, and again, it's not just pagans versus Christians, it's really Catholics versus everybody else, because Protestants, a lot of Protestants don't like Halloween either.
Right, sure.
And during the Reformation period, they tried to shut down a lot of those festivals.
True,
you know?
Yeah.
So...
Just a side note I was going to bring up, it kind of popped into my head. So a lot of listeners might not know the subgenre of music called black metal.
I promise you they don't.
So it comes from Norway, and the whole thrust of like black metal music coming out of Norway is the hatred of Christianity coming into Norway, and the retaliation of Christianity taking their heritage away or taking their pagan roots away. Yeah. They see it as a threat, and so this whole like genre of music, of black metal music, was like to like combat Christian belief in Norway. Pretty crazy.
And so on that note, this gets us to kind of the next step in this debate of chicken or the egg. Was it Catholics or was it pagans or, you know? And we keep saying pagan, and I'm trying to distinguish between what is like pagan, as in like satanic rituals or worshiping other gods or whatever, versus just historically, like what did Irish people or Scottish or, you know, like whoever.
And that word pagan, all it really means is farm dweller. It means somebody that dwells outside the city.
Out of the city,
They're out in the woods, you know, the folklore.
That's like saying barbarian.
Right,
like,
barbarian,
you know,
right. It's something that's not Christianized.
Yeah, so there's a connotation to that word pagan. Like we think, oh, the devil, they got pentagrams on their, tattooed on their backs, and you know. But no, we're just saying like there's a historical aspect to this that we have to address. So that's why I'm trying to use all of these descriptive words: pagan, Celtic, Irish, whatever, just so that you understand. We're not talking about like devils with horns, and you know. Anyway, but. Here's the thing you have to remember historically about Ireland and about that area. And since you mentioned the black metal thing and people trying to return to the Celtic or pagan roots of Halloween, quote unquote, there's not a lot of written history from pre-Christian Ireland.
Right, yeah. A lot of the stuff that we know about the ancient Celts, which was kind of a mishmash of people that were in the same area that had different dialects and all this stuff, but it's all like third party, or you know, outside witnesses, like the Romans and who else? The Romans and the Greeks, which they were all at war with each other. So, the stuff we do know about them could be true, but it could also be propaganda of like, oh, we really want to conquer them. They're all barbarian people. Let's talk bad about them.
Yeah, so you have to consider the source. You have to consider the time period that this happened in. But some of the earliest writings, earliest like Celtic or, you know, Irish or whatever, that region, the earliest writings and artifacts that we have are from like the 5th century, you know, 430, 400 something. And that was when the first Christians, or, you know, Catholics, the Pope sent people to evangelize that region. And you have some things that are written in like a local language. I believe that like the Irish, that, you know, that people were one of the first groups to have like a formed written language, like out of the area, the people that lived in that area. But some of the earliest writings are mixed with local dialect and Latin, which is people coming from Rome, you know, these are Christians coming from Rome, and they're starting to write things down. Yeah. And they're not, of course, going to write down, like if I were a Christian, again, let's use the 4th of July example. If I'm writing for posterity what the 4th of July is about, I'm not going to include step-by-step instructions on how to honor the pagan god of, you know, whatever. So a lot of things that you see today, like even about like Thor, like Norse mythology, that was written down by Christians. And so we don't know how accurate some of it is because they don't think those are real gods.
Some of them, for
you
sure.
Know? So just keep that in mind because like TikTok and YouTube and stuff right now, everybody who's not Catholic is going to tell you this is a pagan Celtic holiday. But where do we learn that from? We learned it from Catholics. So consider the source.
So it's definitely a tricky subject to try to pinpoint. You're not going to get it with 100% accuracy. You have to weigh and balance everything. And not everything they probably said back then was true, but not everything they probably said back then was false either. So it's like,
and what people are saying in the modern day, oh, this is a tradition that they used to do. Well, the only way you know that is because Christians wrote it down.
Right,
so
So
I'm convinced some of the stuff they're adding, I think that they add value or add information to.
Oh yeah, there's embellishment for sure.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, for sure.
So consider the source, so that's the historical perspective. Now, let's move on past.
So we
Catholic.
told you all that to say we don't know.
We don't know. Again,
there is no answer.
It's
Thanks
your
for tuning
classic
in.
catch-22, chicken or the egg.
No, but I think we can wade through it and kind of weigh it and see, well, that seems reasonable. That seems like it might fit, or no, that sounds preposterous.
Yeah, so let's move on from the Catholic stuff, okay? Let's say that there was a pagan holiday. Not that there was, but there is. Again, these periods of the year are recognized by groups all over the world because they see the sun and moon and stars. Remember in Genesis 1, God said that the sun and moon and stars were signs for seasons and times. And so people around the world know how to read these signs. Mm-hmm. And this is where I get my Genesis 6 connection, because the book of Enoch, remember, says that angels taught how to read the sun and moon and stars.
Yes, they did.
So, maybe there is some dubious, deviant origin to some of this stuff.
Oh, there definitely is.
And more on that later, because it's not just in this European area, it's all over the world. So how did everybody start recognizing the same, start inferring the same message from the sun and moon and stars at this time of year?
Right.
But anyway, the sun, everybody can see these things. Everybody can look up at the sky and measure the path of the sun and moon and stars. So you don't need, there's a purely natural explanation for it, is what I'm trying to say.
Right.
You can do a purely materialistic explanation for it. So the reason that this day is significant is because it's halfway between the autumn equinox and the winter solstice. The autumn equinox is around September 20th, a little over halfway through the month of September. And equinox is when the path of the sun appears to cross over the equator, as the Earth is revolving around the sun. The sun is basically pointed straight at the equator, at the Earth, and so the days are longest. That time of the year is the warmest, whereas a solstice is when the sun seems to pass higher or lower in an arc over the sky. So instead of going straight across the Earth over the equator, it's going across the northern hemisphere or southern hemisphere. And so the winter solstice happens around December 20th. October 31st, Halloween, is directly between the autumn equinox and the summer solstice. So everybody can see that path in the sky. They know that a time is changing, the time of the year is changing from the time of year that's light and warm, and they can have crops and go outside, safely. They're transitioning to the time of the year where it's dark and it's cold. And again, Europe being in the northern hemisphere, in the winter solstice, the sun is crossing over the southern hemisphere. And so the northern hemisphere, the days are very short. That's why we have daylight savings and stuff. The days get shorter, the temperature gets colder. And so, Europe being in the northern hemisphere, this is their winter. And so they recognize that as a time of darkness. And so anyway, that's the significance, the solar, the calendar significance of this date, and that's why they would celebrate at that time, right?
Mm-hmm. Well, it's flat, so
the Earth is flat.
Yeah, the Earth is flat, so.
Well, crap! None of my research.
Yeah, all your research is bunk now.
So it's just a disc floating through space, and it's the center of the universe. So I guess the sun goes around the disc. Okay, flat Earth centric.
Flat Earth centric.
All right, we'll have to have a alternate timeline episode of this episode where we explain that. We're going to explain Halloween again with a flat Earth perspective.
Oh, that's funny.
So and
this is stuff, just a side note, that all the ancient people knew about.
Right, they recognized these things.
They even constructed buildings that would bring in certain light on certain days and certain times.
Like Gilgal Rephaim, we talked about that last time.
Amazing.
So for Europe, because they're in the northern hemisphere, the days are shorter, they're colder, so there's more darkness.
Yep.
This was associated with the dark half of the year.
The dark time, yeah.
Right? Summer would be the light, and winter would be the dark, right? The winter solstice, by the way, is around December 20th or 22nd, something like that, which is when we celebrate Christmas. So that's another discussion.
Yeah.
Because people say the same thing about Christmas. Oh, y'all are just appropriating a pagan, you know. So, yeah, it's a calendar day. Everybody can look up in the sky and see what the sun's doing. So, basically, the days get shorter and colder and darker, and so they would recognize this because, again, they don't have modern heating, like central heating and air like we do. They don't have modern food storage.
It was a big cultural shift from light to dark.
Yeah, and hot to cold, right?
Right.
Like we have to prepare for winter.
This is another little, when you say cold, medieval Christians, they actually depicted hell and the devil as cold a lot of times before the whole fire thing.
Yeah, he's like blue or gray or something.
Blue. If you see certain paintings, like the devil's painted blue, because to be further away from the light and heat source would be to be cold.
Yeah.
Which is interesting.
So I guess hell froze over.
Hell froze over, and then it heated up, I guess, later on.
The modern day heated it back up. Yeah. So think about that too. Like when we've talked about the wilderness in the Bible, or we've talked about mountains and valleys and stuff, like the gods live in gardens that are lush, and the like death and demons live in the desert, right?
Yeah.
Well, the winter's kind of the same way for these ancient cultures because winter is tough. It's hostile.
Yeah.
You know, it's hard to get food. It's hard to stay warm. You can't travel.
What are the walkers in Game of Thrones called?
Oh yeah,
the ice walkers or whatever they're called.
Yeah,
that's what they are, man.
So they would hold a festival, and what's it called, Josh? It's not called Samhain.
Everybody pronounces it Samhain, but it's weird. It's Samhain.
Yeah.
Samhain is this festival, a Gaelic festival. But yeah, it's around all that harvest time, and it was a celebration of, hey, look at all these crops, and we have all this abundance, and let's celebrate and let's get ready for winter. We got to hunker down and let's drink all the ale we have and have
it's all going to spoil, so we have to have this huge feast and eat all the food.
Yeah. Let's have some bonfires and But yeah, Samhain is how it's pronounced. But
So that right there, again, you can do that with no spiritual association at all.
Sure, yeah.
It's like a hurricane
it's like our
season.
Thanksgiving.
Okay, Thanksgiving.
Yeah, it's like, oh, look at this abundance. We're celebrating the autumn time, and it's like,
I was thinking
get together.
A good parallel is we live in Louisiana, where the power goes out when there's storms and hurricanes and stuff, and you have to eat everything in the fridge because it's going to go bad, right?
You better have gas for your generator.
But that's what the whole community would do. They'd all come together and drink all the alcohol. They would eat all the food.
Yeah.
And
a lot of it was centered around what I was listening to was marriage. Like it was a time when they would there was some spiritual stuff connected to it, but they would kind of like throw things in the fire, and if it popped back out, like not chestnuts, there's another nut, like hazelnuts or something. They would throw them in there, they would pop. And like if a certain shell like landed by you and a certain shell landed by someone else, they'd be married and all that stuff. A lot of like ritualistic marriage ceremony type things going on.
There's a ton of that stuff. And so it was all about, now this is where we start crossing over into superstition
what makes
and
you think
spiritual
like
stuff.
Eating and drinking and giving and taking in marriage and all that, like the days of Noah?
Yeah, that's true. Well, and we touched on this before, that sacrifices in the Bible and in ancient religions were meals. Yeah. It wasn't like, I know in my head, and I'm sure everybody else, you get the basic image of like put a cow, like kill the cow, put it on the altar, you burn it
all up,
and then oh, we're done. We did a sacrifice.
Yeah,
but no, there were feasts that they ate the meat of the sacrifice when it was done. It didn't get thrown away, right?
Right.
And even in the Bible, it says that like the fat and certain portions were reserved for God, for Yahweh. And the priests had to eat the other parts, and none of it could stay overnight. And there's just all kinds of rules.
Even the theology that we get about the conscience in Romans 14, Paul's dealing with, and in Corinth, Paul's dealing with Christians, new Christians, eating meat offered to idols.
Right.
And they're like, wait, we shouldn't be eating this meat, and then they were called weaker Christians.
Right.
And Paul's like, look, like if they think that that's wrong, their conscience is weaker.
Yeah.
In other words, they're new to this.
Yeah.
Give them a break.
And so don't make them suffer.
Right. Don't make them feel bad, make them do something they think is evil but Paul knew, and the more mature Christians that have been around, they're like, well, it's just me.
We know that these are not gods at all.
Yeah, it's
right?
like we're not bothered by this.
Yeah. But that's, again, a perspective we don't have, because when I go to the store and buy deli meat, I don't think about, oh, what God was this offered to, like
what?
when they killed this cow.
The altar of the government.
Yeah. Maybe we should think
USDA.
about that, right? It's just a religious organization. But yeah, you don't think about that. Well, they had to think about that if they went over to somebody's house for a festival or a dinner or whatever, or they bought meat, they had to think about, well, what God was associated with this, right? We don't have that connotation now.
Right.
So this is where we start getting into, like you said, with the bonfires and the nuts and the leaves and the food. And so they started to associate this with spiritual realities.
Right. So this is kind of where we get the ideas of our modern traditions of Halloween connected to a more historical looking, if that's accurate information that we have, which it sounds logical.
Right.
The trick-or-treating, the offerings for the dead. I was watching this Wiccan girl on YouTube. She's a YouTuber and she's a Wiccan, and she was talking about the dumb supper that they have where
it's weird.
It's dumb. Where they don't speak. They create a dinner on Halloween night, and they don't speak, and they eat, and they leave places for dead loved ones to come and eat with them spiritually. And she mentioned this thing called the Ao Shui. And I was like, what? The how what? It's spelled AOSSI. It's pronounced the Ao Shui. And I thought this was really cool. She said that in Celtic religion, that they were kind of like these mischievous spirits, which those are the spirits that you don't want in your house. So the whole idea of the Dumb Supper was to invite loved ones and their spirits and their souls into your house to kind of like commune with you in a sense.
Right.
But she said, look, the Ao Shui, you don't necessarily want those in your house. So what we'll do is we'll create some offerings or snacks or food for them, and we put it outside the door.
Yeah.
And that's going to be for them, and hopefully that will deter them from coming into the house because they're kind of scary.
Yeah.
And they're actually based off of the idea of the fairy, the folklore fairy. We
We're
think
not
of
talking about cute fairies.
Yeah, we think of what's the little fairy from Peter Pan?
Yeah, Tinkerbell.
Yeah, like
which
Tinkerbell.
is technically a pixie, but same.
Right. Yeah, the whole idea of like this little girl with wings or something. But dude, the fairy was a evil, scary little thing.
Right. They would abduct kids and take people's souls and stuff.
Really terrifying. But one of the things about the Ao Shui that I was learning was that tradition somewhat holds that they were fallen angels, and they were the spirits of these fallen angels. And I was like, wow, isn't that funny?
Yeah, what a coincidence.
We've come back to Genesis 6.
Well, so this is again, okay, let's put it in perspective, because we know that we have Catholic traditions mixed in with this.
Right.
So during this time of winter, so remember we explained like scientifically, And maybe you didn't follow it. You can go read about it online. The summer solstice is in the middle of the year in the summer. And that's the best time of year because it's easy to live. There's lots of light. It's warm. You can do crops and, you know, all that stuff. Go to the beach, you know, whatever. But in the winter, it's hard. It's difficult. It's hostile. And so, again, that gets an association with death, which gets an association with evil spirits, right? Because there has to be a cause for death. And where do spirits go? They have to go somewhere, so something has to take them. And, you know, so there's all this spiritual meaning that gets added to this.
Right.
So, like, in the Catholic belief, they believe that part of purgatory, some spirits are allowed to wander the earth because they might have unfinished business or, you know, whatever.
Right.
So we kind of get that idea of, like, ghosts and hauntings and stuff.
Right, they'll come back to their place of death.
Some of that's Catholic in origin, right? Yeah. So, like, part of purgatory might be wandering the earth. Now, at that time of year, so this is the reason this feast is halfway between the summer solstice and the winter equinox. And I hope I didn't say that backwards. I did. Anyway.
It's fine. We forgive you.
Yeah. So anyway, hopefully I didn't say that backwards. But the reason it's halfway is because they recognize this is the time of year where days start getting shorter. They start getting darker. So it's almost like you could divide the year in half. There's the light side and the dark side, right?
Yeah, the Jedi and the Sith.
Which is funny because they're called Sith, right?
It is, dude. Okay, so the Auschwitz is the Irish name for this supernatural Celtic race or whatever, the spirit beings. The Scottish, they actually spell it Sith, so S-I-T-H.
Yeah.
But it's not pronounced Sith, but it's spelled that way. Which I thought, when I saw that, I was like,
nerd alert.
But yeah, pronounced the same, but spelled like the Jedi and Sith.
Yeah.
And they're comparable to, like I said a minute ago, fairies and elves.
Yeah.
Which is where a lot of that folklore comes from.
So this time of year is associated with darkness and death and evil and stuff, okay? And so they celebrate the festival halfway in between because that's when the transition happens. That's when the light time of the year is ending and the dark time of the year is beginning. And they actually believe that when this transition happened, the veil between worlds was very thin, and spirits who might wander the earth could be interacted with. And like in the sense of purgatory, you know, they might be making their way to heaven, like they might be ascending, or they might be trying to resolve unfinished business. With the fairies, like that stuff, they believe that, like, if someone had gone missing, say in the woods, or died mysteriously or something, that these beings might be transporting their souls from the burial mounds into the, what did they call it? The home where the fairies go, like glens or something, you know?
Yeah.
So they actually believe that they would be escorting their souls. And so if you wanted to save them, you had to do it today, right?
Yeah.
So there's all kinds of weird, and that's actually where a lot of people think it's one place. So remember, we didn't explicitly say this at the beginning, but I hope you got the idea. The origin of Halloween is very vague.
Yeah.
Like there's dozens of different traditions that all fall on the same day.
Right.
It falls on the same day because of the solar event that's, like, everybody knows this is when this happens.
Transitional shift, yeah.
Okay, but there's traditions all over the world that have kind of boiled down to our modern day Halloween.
Right, and then you have people traveling back and forth and bringing their traditions and cultures with them,
right,
and
they're
taking
mixing,
it other places and mixing together. And,
yeah.
And even the Celts, you know, them being a mixture of different peoples and traditions and stuff, and it all was a big melting pot of satanic ritual.
Yeah. So I thought that was kind of cool. But again, you have people that are, you know, maybe we can save the soul from being damned, basically, get it out of the hands of the fairies or, you know, whatever, as they make their journey tonight, you know.
Right.
And so but I was saying that's one of the reasons, one of the supposed origins for dressing in costumes.
Right.
People would paint their faces black with, like, ash. They would wear masks or something because they believed there were these bad spirits out and about that night.
These Auschwitz were out there looking for you.
And so in order to not get got, you had to disguise yourself as one of them.
Yeah, you could disguise yourself and hopefully steer past them. They wouldn't recognize you.
So that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
And again, you know, that's like, oh yeah, that's definitely pagan. But, like, Catholics do this kind of stuff. So think about architecture of cathedrals and stuff. They have gargoyles and Medusas and like,
yeah.
And then, so the belief is that, like in that case,
to ward off the bad.
Right.
Yeah.
It, like you would think, well, if I'm scared of a demon attacking a church, I should put like an angel out, right?
Yeah.
They believe that putting an image of an evil spirit on the outside of the building, it frightened away the other evil spirits because they said that's a dangerous place for me to go. They've got the head of this spirit mounted on the outside of their building, kind of like you see in like Lord of the Rings or like these old, like the heads on the spikes, right?
Right, yeah. It's pretty intimidating.
So you had to have an image of the spirit that you were trying to scare off.
Gotcha.
And so, so anyway, these traditions are just all over.
Well, the idea of like warding off evil with like sacred things is a very heavily Catholic, think of the crucifix.
Yeah, yeah.
And it being like almost like an amulet, to ward off, evil spirits or something.
Well, it's just, I seem to remember some of the earliest architecture, from what I've read, some of the earliest like church buildings had Medusa heads on the outside.
Oh, wow.
And it's like, why would you put that on a church? Like, if I wanted to intimidate an evil spirit, I should put a godly image on the outside of my church. And they said that it was because if a spirit approached, you would have the head of this bigger, badder spirit hanging on the outside of your building, and the spirit would be like, oh snap,
Oh, dang.
Can't go over there. That's a bad place to be, right?
Going back to the spirit world.
Yes.
But did we talk about like the veil, the idea of the veil being thin during that time?
We mentioned it because these spirits are traveling back and forth, right?
And then the idea that some of the veil being thinned was in certain places.
Oh, yeah.
Which kind of sounds like portals or gateways,
Yes.
stuff we've talked about many times. But I think it's interesting that no matter what culture we're talking about and what time period we're talking about, like they all kind of had this understanding of there is a spirit world and it's really close to ours.
Yeah.
It's parallel with ours and there's ways to get back and forth, which is interesting.
Yeah, and again, the idea that reinforces the idea that we've discussed before, that there's not like this distinction between natural and supernatural.
Right.
Like you have these two realms that exist on top of each other.
Yeah.
Like, there are spirits around us all the time, and we just can't detect them, essentially, except for at that time of year.
Right.
Which is why people that are in the modern day occult and stuff, they do have rituals and things on this day.
Right.
And they think, I would even say that they project onto non-occult people, right?
Mm-hmm.
Non-Satanists or Wiccan or whatever. They think that the reason people are dressing up and going trick-or-treating and having parties and things is because it's so real that everyone detects it whether they're aware of it or not, right? And I've heard people say before that like they won't celebrate Halloween because they know people who have been in the occult, and they say, kind of like you said, like violating their conscience.
Right.
It's like, if I know that I or someone I love came out of that background, I don't want to do this, even though I think it's okay, because it's going to violate their conscience, right? It might cause them to stumble. Like they think this is a very real thing.
Right.
And I mean, we acknowledge that it is real. There are evil spirits and there are rituals that people perform to communicate with them. But is trick-or-treating, going door to door and getting candy, like, is that worshiping or communicating with evil spirits? Like, that's a different question.
Right. Yeah.
So it might be okay for you to do, but I'm just throwing that out there, that like people who have spiritual significance on that day, they think it applies to everybody.
Right.
Well,
it's kind of like, not a trick question, but it's almost like a, well, yes and no. It's like, is eating food a sin?
Yeah.
It's like, well, no, but yeah, it can be. It's like one of those questions almost.
Well, that's
at least
the
for
thing
our modern idea of what Halloween is.
That's the thing. I've heard people say, like, we don't do, like, people do Fall Fest. Like, maybe I don't want to acknowledge Halloween, but
Trunk or treat
or Fall Fest, or whatever. Like, it's okay to do that maybe on any other day, or you do it on October 31st and just don't call it Halloween.
Yeah.
And that makes it okay.
It's like,
and then there are people that are like, if you do anything fun that day at all, you're acknowledging that.
Well, I think it's funny that
where do you draw the line?
People that think Halloween is evil, which there is definitely some evilness to it. I'm not negating that, but the idea of like, hey, we're gonna wear a costume and take the kids out and let them get some candy for the night, and have fun with their family or their friends or whoever. and people that think that's evil, but they'll have a trunk or treat at their church and dress up with their family and go and get candy and like do the exact same thing.
I would just say that's your classic slippery slope.
Right. It's
I mean,
like,
again,
okay.
if I eat a piece of chocolate on October 31st, am I celebrating Samhain? Right? Like,
you're done. I smell the brimstone on you already.
Yeah. I'm just saying, I like chocolate, man. And there's a lot of it around Halloween.
Now, see, I like chocolate, but I like the fruitier candies. I like the Starbursts. I like the Skittles.
The fruity candies.
The Airheads.
No. And let me break this down real quick. This is super spiritual. This is something the Lord showed me. If you put fruit candy and chocolate candy in the same container, it ruins the chocolate candy.
Well, yeah.
Please don't do that. I do not want a Skittle flavored Reese's cup.
Dude, I don't
know how people don't understand that.
In my movie room, I have a little old like candy machine, and I put Reese's on one side and I put Skittles on the other, and somehow they got mixed together.
Oh man.
And it was like, and they look very similar. So it was like trying to find
that is just the word, because
chocolate.
I will pick chocolate over a fruit flavor every day.
Yeah.
And so if I find that like somebody had some Starburst and like a Hershey's bar in the same bag, I'm like, oh
they
man.
touch each other. We must stay separate.
It's 2022,
guys.
Candy
segregation.
Like, we know this.
How dare you? Where's Greta when I need her?
It is a property of chocolate.
How dare you?
Well, anyway, trick-or-treating. So costumes have multiple origins, and that idea. So that was called, there was a name for that. But yeah, dressing up has more than one origin as well. Yeah. I mean, but that's the one that everybody quotes. Trick-or-treating has a couple of origins.
Yeah.
More than one.
There's a lot.
And again, it's like, well, which one came first?
Right.
So let's address this question real quick. Is doing something that a pagan did, does that make it pagan?
Right.
So like, for instance,
a pagan ate a sandwich one day. So can we not eat sandwiches?
Well, there are people like in the 80s, I can't remember the guy's name, but the rumor started that Halloween was the devil's birthday.
Oh, well, yeah, of course it is.
And and then there was all this stuff about, the evil things that happened that day. And it's like, don't acknowledge this day at all, right? And
did he have a mullet?
I don't remember. No, I never saw a picture of him. I was just reading about it.
I mean, it was the 80s.
But
you can't trust a guy with a mullet.
Yeah.
Speaking of mullets, just real quick, has anybody else noticed that the mullet is back now?
Oh, man.
What the heck is going on?
Yeah.
How did that not get sent to the netherworld where it needs to be? Why is every baseball team and high school kid wearing mullets now?
Somebody snatched it out of the hand of a fairy on October 31st.
What is going on?
Yeah.
I wonder if like mullets were a thing like back in like Bible days. What if Jesus had a mullet? What if Jesus had a mullet?
No, he didn't. I mean, he couldn't.
What if he did?
Maybe.
It would have been perfect.
No. It would have been the perfect mullet. He would have done it excellently.
The perfect mullet. He's like...
Yeah. So trick-or-treating, okay? Yeah. Party in the back. A Halloween party in the back. So...
I want to get back to these Ashui, bro. There's a lot of cool stuff.
Yeah, are they connected to trick-or-treating? Because I can wait on that.
They are kind of. I mean,
because
with the whole idea of like,
outside?
Well, yeah, you give them a treat so you don't get tricked by them. In other words, it was a way of warding them off.
That's true. So when they would dress up like spirits, paint their face, whatever they did, because they didn't want to get snatched by an Ashui, right? Mm-hmm. An evil spirit. They did at one point start carrying like treats, desserts with them. Yeah. Because they were like, I can bargain, I can offer them something. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So that could be one
and
way
then the
that started.
idea of like the turnip. So we have jack-o'-lanterns now with the pumpkin, and supposedly it was connected to this guy named Jack in the Celtic story of I forgot his name, Jack the something. But evidently he made a deal with the devil and it went bad on him, and he had to like carry this lantern around and blah blah blah. You can go read about it. But yeah, it was originally turnips.
And they would light the candle so that it could show the way.
And they would light,
for people
and it would have eyes and a mouth and all this stuff. But then over time they started doing pumpkins because they were easier to carve, supposedly.
Right.
So that's how we got that, supposedly.
Yeah.
But another thing about the Ashui real quick, this is really cool. They were said to live in fairy forts.
Weird.
Fairy forts across the Western Sea. They coexisted with the world of humans, and their world was described as a parallel universe that was parallel with ours, and they were able to walk among the living. They were also called people of the mounds.
Oh, yeah.
Which is really interesting.
Burial mounds, right?
Right. So they were called the people of the mounds. Sometimes they called them little people because they were associated with fairies and dwarves and elves and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So interesting things there.
So like dwarfs.
So like, yeah. And then that ties into like giant mounds and
the
Nephilim.
Yep. Wow. That's pretty cool.
There's even like archaeological evidence of giants, like 8-9 foot tall giants, supposedly, I'll just say supposedly, buried with smaller sized people.
Oh, yeah.
That maybe these smaller people worshipped this giant figure.
Or were employed by.
But were found supposedly buried together, which is interesting.
Yeah. Man, that's trippy.
It is. But it's just crazy. Like, we're like, let's talk about Halloween. It's like, holy crap, here's like Genesis 6, markings all over this stuff.
Yep, exactly. It all goes back. Well, so then, that's one possible origin for the trick-or-treating and dressing up in costumes. Another thing for trick-or-treating, which again is associated with Catholicism and All Saints Day, was souling, right? And so, if I understand right, the idea was that groups of kids would go door to door, and you would give them a soul cake, right? It was a special dessert that was made for October 31st for All Hallows Eve, and these kids would. It seems like at one point in time it was called mumming, M-U-M, because they would act out a little scene, and you would reward them with candy. But souling was the kids would go door to door, and it's kind of like in preparation for the winter. These might be kids with, in poverty or whatever. They would want food, so you'd offer them a cake, and in return they would pray for your relatives that are in purgatory, and they'd pray for you, and so they would offer prayers in return for food, right? So that's connected to that purgatory and that Catholic tradition. So that's one kind of clear connection to like going door to door and giving something. Trick or treating itself didn't really get popular until I feel like it was the 30s or 40s or something.
Yeah, it was like the 20s or 30s. But you can kind of see this painting coming to life, with all the wearing the mask and giving the treats for the kids and warding off the dead spirits, and
they would have. So it was like Irish immigrants that brought a lot of this over, and so they would do that. They would go door to door, and so it kind of became popular in America after that. And there's just several origins to it. And then another reason for costumes is because when trick or treating, at one point it did mean vandalism, right? Like, you give me something, or I'm gonna spray paint your door. Exactly. So they would wear disguises so they wouldn't know who they were. So yeah. And it's so funny because like this exact topic is like a mirror image of Christmas. Like the Christmas traditions and origins and almost exactly the same like stuff, with Saint Nicholas and the coal and the, getting a coal if you were bad, putting stockings over the fireplace and all this stuff. Like there's so many like things. Yeah, because Saint Nick would, spoilers for our Christmas episode, I guess, but he would leave money in people's shoes. Yeah, and that's coins in there. Yeah. So interesting. Yeah, man. So I think kind of the point is that there's several different origins for what we practice today. Yeah. And again, back to that question of like, is something that a bad person or a pagan did, does that make it pagan? Like I said, the devil's birthday. Right. There are people that think like October 31st is the devil's day. So if you do anything on that day, it honors him, right? Right. Well, how can a day be given over to the devil? Yeah. Like how does he he doesn't own it.
Yeah, he's at work every day.
Yeah.
Like he's not like heightened.
Well, and I heard in researching this, I was watching a lecture from like a Catholic priest, and he was showing the Catholic origins of these traditions, and he said something that I thought was pretty profound, and it was that people for some reason think that demons or the devil, their ability to perform evil is somehow equivalent to God's good. And it's like, do you really think that, like, because apparently there's traditions in some places, I don't think it ever got widespread or anything, but that October 30th was the day to do bad things, so that, and then that was before, All Hallows Eve, right? And so that was like, they would perform bad deeds, and then you'd perform good deeds and pray for, but anyway.
Confession.
He was like, yeah, so it's that idea that like the bad things that I do or that the devil does are somehow balanced out, like they balance out with God's good deeds and the saints' good deeds. And he was like, that's ridiculous. Obviously, God's goodness overwhelms darkness and evil. Like, there's no equivalent to God's power.
Sounds like dualism.
Yeah.
Like, there's an equal power on each side, but it's not that way.
Yeah. So I just thought that was a pretty profound way to think about it. And, like, there's even pagan traditions where people would go door to door singing. So, like, is Christmas caroling pagan?
Right. Yeah.
Or if we sing in church on a Sunday?
Well, the Christmas tree's pagan, too.
Yeah.
That's in the Bible.
Yeah. Oh, man.
I'll have to find that scripture, but I'll save that for Christmas.
Yeah. I firmly believe it's not, but that'll be fun to discuss.
It sounds a lot like a Christmas tree.
Yeah, but that's another good example. There's like a Christian story and there's a pagan story, So like, how do you say which one is really real? And if I put a Christmas tree in my house, am I suddenly not saved? And so it really is a matter of conscience.
Right.
And I'll say this too. So Josh and I, one of the things that we did in preparation for this, we watched a video from Mike Winger. He's a pastor that has a channel on YouTube, and he does apologetics and teaching and stuff. And he's pretty good. Like
really cool.
There's some topics that I'll look him up to see his opinion on. And so he had a pretty good video on Halloween, and we can maybe share the link to that. But he also pointed out, he had, his video was like the 7 sides of Halloween, and so he went through that. He was like, well, there's Catholic, there's ancient, like Celtic pagan stuff. There's dressing up and going door to door asking for candy. Like, that's not bad. Like, are those kids doing something bad? Probably not.
Right.
One of the things he mentioned, though, was like some of the modern context of like the sexy nurse, the sexy witch,
the
like
sexy everything.
Or like Freddy Krueger, like the horror, scary stuff.
Yeah, like the terribly violent or the extremely promiscuous. Like we should know that that's not right.
Exactly.
Like we should know
so there
that.
is a dark side.
Sure.
And he explained it perfectly. I thought he talked about the carnival mentality, right? The idea that a person, if they're in a certain environment, like a certain group of people or a certain day of the year or whatever, under certain circumstances, they'll make decisions they wouldn't normally make.
Right, exactly.
And it's called like a herd or carnival mentality.
Yeah.
So Halloween, you might have someone who's perfectly, a responsible person that has sound judgment and is very, respectable, act out on Halloween. They might dress overly sexual or dress in, as like a horror character or whatever.
Yeah.
And they wouldn't normally do that. And so he's like, obviously that's wrong, being promiscuous or being like,
glorifying
the fear and the violence and stuff.
Right.
Yeah. Like, obviously that's wrong. So we shouldn't have to question that. But does that mean that if a little girl dresses like a princess and goes and knocks on her neighbor's door, like, she's not necessarily doing anything wrong, right?
Right, sure.
And I even know a lot of people that are Christians that they will, when people come to their door, they'll, give them a gospel tract or, like they give them candy, obviously. Like Mike Winger, he said, we give good candy because if somebody comes to my door, I'm going to talk about Jesus and I don't want them to hate me, right?
Yeah.
So I'm going to give them good candy.
Let me tell you about Jesus. Here's a piece of broccoli.
Yeah. Oh, that's something we didn't talk about when we were talking about festivals and stuff with Samhain. Bobbing for apples is a Halloween tradition.
Yeah. Supposedly there was an abundance of apples, and
well, it was a symbol of abundance. There was a Celtic goddess that was symbolized with an
Goddess of
apple.
apples.
Yeah, well, yeah, but it was like a god of harvest or something.
Yeah.
And so the apple was symbolic. So if you went to somebody's door and they gave you an apple, they were saying, "Oh, I hope your year is, or that your winter."
I
or
wonder if
whatever
that's connected
is
to like
abundant.
giving your teacher an apple.
Maybe. I hope you can put up with us students for the year.
I wonder if any student
No,
ever
I
gave
don't
like
think
a
so.
can of like applesauce or something.
Maybe.
Does
Does it count if it's already mushed up?
Yeah.
But no, like bobbing for apples, there's a origin for that. That's
So I'm glad you
based
came
on
back
that.
to the Samhain thing, because I had a couple of little things that I
Okay,
could
go
throw in
ahead.
the wrench of our system here. The Druids.
Oh yeah.
So the Druids were like the holy men of the Celtic religions. Obviously, our modern interpretations of Druids, are like we're associated with witchcraft and sorcery and magic, and that was probably true. But I saw this other thing about this. So there was like a 3-level or 3 different offices of like the holy figures in Celtic religion. And one of them is obviously the Druid. Like we know, most people know about the Druid, which was kind of like the holy man, the shaman, the sorcerer, wizard type figure. We always think of like the long robe and like Gandalf looking Druid guy.
A wizard.
But then there was the Bard. I automatically thought, like medieval, like minstrel.
Yeah, we're
like,
making more Dungeons and Dragons
right?
references.
Yeah, exactly. But the Bard was a poet and somebody who was almost like a physical like blog. Like they would hire a bard to like
record what they did.
Record in his head and in his poems or music that like their history or their origins or whatever they believed, He was almost like an index of like
so then people could keep that
oral
memory
tradition,
because it was easier to remember a song or a poem, right?
Yeah, so
like
he
Good
was
King
like
Wenceslas.
He was like a philosopher or a historian, but also like a poet and a singer.
Yeah.
But he was closely connected to the Druids, who were kind of the more spiritual side of it. But then they had this third class called the Vates. I don't know if you heard of that.
I don't think so.
I'd never heard of it either.
Which is shocking because I'm a huge nerd.
Right, and so I'd never heard of this either, but the Vates were like, if there was a sacrifice to be performed, the Vate would be the one that would do it, with the oversight of the Druid. And then the Bard would...
So it's kind of a priest type role.
Almost, yeah. It's like a 3-tiered system almost, but they were all kind of interconnected. So the Vate, which is interesting, is where we get the word Vatican.
Oh.
Vaticanus in Latin.
Because they have the priest role.
It means like priestly, or it means like a seer or somebody who connected to the spirit realm, or a prophet.
Or like a medium, not a medium, sorry, that would be the wrong word.
Right,
but like
right. But I was like, man, that is crazy. But yeah, it's connected to that word. And I was like, wow, I'd never heard of that. So it was like this 3-tiered system of like the Druid, the Bard, and the Vate. And the idea that the Vatican, that word Vatican, is connected to that, meaning prophet or seer. I was like, wow, that's really crazy.
And full circle, because Catholics invented Halloween.
The Catholics, they were behind it all along.
Well, this is what really threw a curveball in it for me. Okay, shifting gears a little bit here, if that's all right.
Yeah.
Do you have any more facts about the Auschwitz?
I don't think so. The Auschwitz, the Bards, and the Vates. But one thing that was interesting about the Bard was that he was closely connected to the Vate and the Druid, which were the spiritual connect points to the religion. And he would sing and use poetry and the arts to convey the message of the spiritual parts of the religion.
Right.
And what I thought was so interesting about that is how Hollywood and music today still kind of does the same thing. Like they convey a lot of spiritual stuff through music and through the arts and through fashion and through movies and film. And I thought that was kind of interesting.
Well, you can go full-blown conspiracy on that because remember we've talked about like Hollywood as an indoctrination program.
Oh, definitely. Yeah.
Like aliens and demons.
Right.
And
sure.
a lot of, like when people think about holidays, since we're talking about holidays, when they talk about religions or whatever, a lot of times people's, the reference they have is what they see in media.
Oh yeah.
So is Hollywood, is somebody producing these things on purpose
a lot of
to
the
steer
things, a lot of the things
population.
that we believe and how we act in society today are from indoctrination of what we're consuming.
Yep.
You don't think if you can control everything that we consume, then you can steer the herd whichever way you want to go.
Perfect segue. This is so what I was about to get onto. The thing that threw a curveball in it for me was the Day of the Dead traditions
South America.
in Central and South America. So, and speaking of Hollywood, you know, they have movies like Coco, the Pixar movie that came out a while back.
My kids love that movie too.
So I'll say, I think it's a great movie. It's a pretty decent story.
Yeah.
It's the animation style is fun and cool. You know, it's a good movie. But you think about the other side to it, that like it is Disney-fying,
right?
You know, it's kind of making it cute.
Sure.
This Day of the Dead tradition, which borderlines necromancy, honestly.
No, I would say it is
and ritual sacrifice and stuff.
Yeah, definitely.
Know? And so, and again, it also goes to show that cultures around the world recognized that time of year as a transition and as a spiritual time, because here you have groups of people on the other side of the planet from Ireland and Scotland and those areas.
And they're recognizing a day for the dead and this spiritual veil and
they have kind of the same catch-22 that
offerings to dead spirits and all that junk.
Yeah. They have kind of the same catch-22 that the Celtic and the Catholic people have, because there's a huge debate over whether that was the Day of the Dead ceremonies and stuff, whether that was a real not pre-colonial, but, you know, like pre-Catholic, I guess, or pre-Christian, whether that was a real ancient tradition from the Aztecs or whether that has been written in. Because like in the 1930s, the president of Mexico tried to create kind of this national loyalty, this national identity as, you know, we're a strong people that go all the way back to the Aztecs. And so this is our holiday. So like a lot of people think it's a modern creation. So it could be the same thing, that like when Catholics came over to the Americas, they would have been celebrating All Saints Day. And you see a mishmash of like Catholicism with Day of the Dead and the lighting of candles and all that stuff. So the thing that's different about the similarities, I guess, to Day of the Dead is that it recognizes the people who have passed away. It honors family members that have gone before us. A lot of times they like leave chairs open. They put their pictures out on the mantle. I mean, if you watch the movie Coco, like you get the basic idea. So that's similar to a lot of those Celtic traditions, right? Yeah. You know, they would have the empty chair, or, you know, whatever. They have some tortillas out on the table, some tacos. But there's some other things kind of built into it. Like if you believe that it's of Aztec origins, they would make idols out of certain tree bark that were spirits that would either ward off evil spirits, or they would guide humans in the afterlife. Like in Coco, the yellow petals that are all over, those are marigold flowers. And they believed what they would do is they would, when they would set out their offering and the things to remember them, and they would set out like the cloth and everything, they would clean the graves and stuff, and they would set out these flowers because of the smell and because it's a attractive sight. And so that became the tradition to put these marigolds out to kind of help clean up these graveyards and things. And then there's some really like minute details, like I didn't know this because they don't go into it in Coco, right? I'm glad you're getting all of your historical outline from Coco. But I'm just saying, like that's the innocent. They try to make it innocent. Right? Yeah. So, but this is know what they're doing. It's a national holiday. Like it's recognized in schools. Exactly, like there are altars set up in schools and stuff. And so, but they try to do like there's like an elemental aspect to it where they like candles, like the fire, the heat and the light of the fire is supposed to like welcome and guide spirits. They have to set out something from earth and water and air. So like they do aromas and incense, they do food, they would do like bread and put some dirt out. And so like that's the earth, and they would put like the person's favorite drink and some water, because they believe that the spirits get thirsty as they traveled. So there's like all these like kind of minute spiritual things, and you're like, oh, we're just honoring the dead. And no, it's a little more than just honoring the dead. So
which you will say, like, there's nothing wrong with remembering a loved one that's passed away, you know, whether they were Christian or not. You know, thinking of a loved one. You know, I just had a family member that passed away recently, and it's like, I think it's good to remember them, to honor them. You know, if you have a picture of them or something, you put it up, you want to remember who they were, if your mom died or your grandmother or your grandfather, to remember them and carry on a legacy, especially if it was a Christian legacy, you know,
like visiting a gravesite.
But when it gets to the point of like contacting and connecting with that side of that's where I think biblically, you know, and I got some scriptures pulled up, but biblically, that's an error. That's something that we shouldn't be dabbling in.
It really is a fine line, because again, in those cases, especially in the Day of the Dead, I'm sure there's equivalents in the Celtic traditions too, but like in the Day of the Dead and the Central and Southern American stuff, they are offering things to the dead. They're putting out their favorite food. They're trying to receive wisdom or love, you know, warm feelings or whatever.
Right.
Like it really is crossing that line of like not just remembering but communicating, and I think that's where the question comes in, is like, is this wrong? And so I don't know. I don't have, you know, I'm not Hispanic, and I don't have anybody in my family that's Hispanic, so I don't know if it's something that can be observed without that part of it. Right. You know, like. But like, if you have relatives that die, it's common to go out to their gravesite and
that's what I was
tell
say.
stories,
like,
tell stories about them.
That we do as Americans, you know. Yeah.
So it's kind of, where's that line?
Yeah.
You know, it's different if you're trying to communicate with the dead, which is something the Bible explicitly says not to do.
Right.
And then the question of like, is it really ancient? Because there are modern scholars who study. You know, Hispanic or Mexican history and stuff like that say it's not an ancient tradition. It's when Catholics came over, they had their
they had it
All Saints Day and stuff. They had their traditions already. Yeah. And then locals.
And it was thrusted upon us.
Yeah. Well, like again, the movie Coco, because it's everybody has seen it, or I assume a lot of people have seen it.
But I've seen one called Book of Life. Okay. And it's almost the exact same tradition.
Like the little paper, even the little paper decorations that they set out, they cut images, you know, like, and it's typically religious icons like a cross and that sort of thing. Yeah. But the reason they do that is because when Catholics were there, they said, hey, let's not carve idols out of wood anymore. Why don't you just make some nice paper and hang it up? And so they taught them how to cut, you know.
Which is still wood. Just very thin wood.
I mean, but anyway, so again, chicken or the egg, the question, I think I've heard people say it both ways. Like Catholics basically did the same thing to Mexicans that they did to the Celt, or Celts. How do you say it?
Right, Celts, yeah.
But the Celts.
The Seltzers.
The Celtics, the Celtics. Well, anyway, but then there are some people that like, no, it started out as the Catholic holiday, and then locals tried to say, oh, actually, we have Aztec origins, and they did something similar. But I think the similarities, either way, whichever way you slice it, the idea that day is associated with the dead and the veil between worlds and stuff. It just seems like this is a common theme, no matter how you look at it.
Yeah, anywhere you go, there's some sort of connection there.
Yeah, it's weird, man.
Yeah, it's definitely interesting, and I think the more we do this podcast, I think the more we see that people are the same no matter where you are. We have the same ideas, we have the same feelings in our hearts, and we know the real narrative of the universe and the world, and we might interpret it in different ways, but...
Well, that just goes back to the Genesis 1 through 11 story. Like, we talked about the Garden of Eden, and we talked about Mount Hermon. In the future, we'll talk about the Tower of Babel, but, like, we believe that people all came from the same origin, and that the good things and the bad things they were taught You know, they were taught some good things by God, and they were taught some bad things by angels who rebelled,
Yep.
and then people spread out over the whole world after Genesis 11. And so why would someone in Central America or South America be celebrating the same day the same way as someone in
Right.
you know,
that are worlds
in
apart,
Europe?
and they're not supposed to have any contact whatsoever together. Yeah.
Yeah, it's coincidence.
Pyramids all over the world.
Yes. Woo, pyramids. Well, so to wrap up here, again, then there's more basic stuff, like we said, like, is there anything explicitly wrong with trick-or-treating? No, if you're not vandalizing people's houses and stuff. If you're not, and I'll say if you're not dressing up like it, you know. Yeah.
See, even that, like, little parts, I'm not super Christian-y. Like, if you dress up like a scary something or not, I don't have a problem with that. But
Well, it is
do,
weird.
you know?
It is. I'll say it is weird to like.
I mean, like I watch
to say that stuff is demonic and that's
Right,
horror
sure,
horror
yeah,
genre.
yeah.
And then one day of the year it's cute. You know, like
yeah.
like I'm not. That's a line I'm going to draw.
Right.
Same.
And I'm just playing devil's
for,
advocate here. Like, yeah, I kind of think this way, but playing devil's advocate at the same time. Like, I watch horror movies.
Yeah.
There's some I won't watch for sure if it gets a little overboard, but like Stranger Things, like that is a.
Yeah.
That
I mean, would you call that horror?
Right. Well,
again, then
last,
you have Slippery Slope. Like,
that
well,
last
this is not
season was
horror.
very horrific and very scary and a lot of
Sci-fi
scary
thriller.
imagery. And it's like, can you dress up like a Demogorgon or is that evil? Or, you know, it's like, it boils down to your conscience.
It does.
God, the Spirit is in you. He'll direct you where you need to go and what's good for you and what's bad for you.
Yeah. And then I'll say that, like, same as the horror or demonic or fearful, whatever, the scary is the promiscuous. Like
that,
you know, if you are responsible and act right all year except October 31st and you show everything and, you know, you act seductive and
right.
Like that's classic carnival.
You're supposed to wear
mentality.
A costume. You're supposed to wear something.
It has to be on your body.
It needs to be
cover
not
your body.
painted on, okay?
Oh gosh. But yeah, that's an inappropriate way to act any day of the year.
Sure.
So like if you're going door to door like that or going to a party and getting drunk and, you know, whatever, it's not okay one day of the year. We have the same problem in the South with Mardi Gras. You know, like everybody tries to act bad before the feast or the fast, I mean.
Well, then it's just the whole idea that like even Paul said like everything is permissible for a Christian.
Right.
Not everything is profitable. So you have to have the Holy Spirit guide you in those things. Like even the promiscuous thing, like is being sexy a sin? What about the context of marriage?
Right.
Can you be sexy with your spouse, you know?
Yeah.
Like, is that a sin? No, I don't think it is. Outside of that, it's
Yeah.
a sin, you know? So it's like, where is it being done? What's the context and what's the heart behind it?
Yep.
So, yeah.
All right, read your necromancy scriptures.
Well, yeah, there's a lot, but one of the things is just like, that like John said is not to believe every spirit and to test the spirits.
Right.
So there's spirits out there that are, he says, don't believe every spirit. So they're telling us stuff, it seems.
Yeah, and I'll say...
And he says, don't believe all of them.
Before learning the things that we've covered in this podcast about spirits, about demons and angels and all that, I used to read that just as like a human spirit. Like me talking to you.
Right, yeah.
Like I would say, hey, Josh gave me this advice. I need to test his advice.
Is he interpreting that scripture right?
Yeah. But this, in the context that we have been discussing things in this podcast, that means spirits. If you receive communication from a spirit.
Right.
Because it says many false prophets have
right.
So who are they hearing messages from?
Yeah, exactly.
So it says test the spirit.
And a lot of scriptures, you know, there's scriptures a lot in the Old Testament about consorting mediums and witches and
right. We all know the story about Saul, right?
Yeah, the witch at Endor.
It was outlawed.
The witch from Star Wars.
Yeah. Actually, in Star Wars, they do have a witch of Endor, like in one of the books.
Oh, really?
Nice. Somebody tried to
stealing from the Bible.
Yep. I don't think that was an original George Lucas idea. I think
Probably
a fan
not.
came up with that, but still.
Yeah.
But yeah, test the spirits, and then Deuteronomy and Leviticus, when Moses gives the law, it says it says basically that people should be put to death if they're a medium or necromancer or they inquire of the dead. I mean, and that's the thing. I think a lot of people, like with maybe Samhain or Day of the Dead or whatever, if you're looking into the origins of this and saying, oh, that's not that bad, like it's okay to honor the dead. Like you might say, I'm not practicing necromancy.
Yeah.
Like, oh, I'm not trying to raise the dead. I'm not making zombies.
Right. If you put a flower on your loved one's grave,
it
I
pretty
wouldn't
clearly
consider that
says,
necromancy.
I just found it's Deuteronomy 18, but it says charmers, mediums, necromancers, or people who inquire of the dead.
Yeah.
So like it draws a line between a medium, a necromancer, and someone who
psychics and
inquires
all
of the
that
dead.
stuff, yeah.
It's like I want to make sure all this is covered.
Right, yeah.
So,
But
but
junk drawer.
yeah. So I would just say, like, no matter how innocent it is, the Bible instructs us not to talk to dead people.
Yeah, and why?
Yeah.
That's the thing. I think it goes back to the Watchers.
Yes.
And the Nephilim.
Well, because they're evil spirits that are going to deceive you.
them to do that.
Yeah.
It talks about the cutting of
That's
roots
true.
and
That's true.
casting of spells and magic
It was taught to us by rebels.
pharmakia and drugs and
yeah.
we got a buddy of ours, I'm gonna shout out Jed over in Lafayette, Christian guy that struggled with drug addiction for a long time, came out of it, got saved, and he's got a podcast out there. Hopefully get him on the show when we talk about pharmakia.
Yeah, we'll have to do that soon since we've discussed
And Ryan,
that in this episode.
do we want to announce maybe a special
I don't want to give too much away. I will say, like, hopefully
maybe for Christmas it could be something we could open as a Christmas gift.
Maybe so. We are just planning. It's the whole podcast has just been me and Josh discussing
just say we're
ideas.
planning things.
We are planning things.
We're planning.
We're going to actually try to
things
have guests on the show to
come
speak
on the
about
show
some of this
that might
stuff.
know things better than we do.
And there's one that has committed that we're very excited about.
Yeah.
Like I'm going to be very difficult not to like fanboy while we're talking to this person.
Yeah, this guest is very highly sought after, and for us to get them on the show would be dope.
And then there's Jed, like you mentioned. Like it would be fun to talk to him.
It'll be a lot of fun. We talk about drugs and demons and stuff.
Yeah, so we're reaching out to some folks because we don't want y'all to just hear our side of it. You know. But yeah.
But happy Halloween.
Yeah. It's okay
may
to
all of your
and again, we're not telling people what's okay and what's not okay.
All of your satanic rituals flourish.
Just test the spirits. Follow your own convictions.
Test the spirits.
Follow your own conscience.
Wear a costume.
I am going to be eating chocolate on the 31st.
I will be eating tons of candy with my children, dressed as a Jedi.
So don't.
My lightsaber definitely comes out every Halloween. I'll just say that. I bought
Whatever,
it.
bro. You keep that at your desk. You hit people as they walk by.
Dude, when I first
don't
bought
act like it's a special day for you.
When I first bought it, I kept it at my desk and just like every 15 minutes or so, I just kind of turn it on, wave it around, and turn it back off. Yeah.
When a meeting gets too boring, Josh just goes, puts up the stakes a little bit.
I like Halloween because it's my excuse as a 40-year-old man boy, to dress as a Jedi and run around with my kids.
Yeah.
But,
it's all a matter of
conscience.
conscience.
Did you know that Jesus is Lord even on Halloween?
It's true. Yeah. It's not the devil's day.
Right.
And one day maybe we'll get a guest that can talk more to like the occult or Wicca or something like that, because that's something not a lot of people know about, and they really do have rituals and things that they do on that day.
Yeah. There is a lot of evil connected to Halloween for sure, but there's a lot of evil all around all the time.
That'll definitely be for a future episode though. So in the meantime, you guys can follow us on Instagram.
Yes, you can.
Exclusively on Instagram.
Pretty much, yeah.
At Behind the Curtain PC.
Yep, at Behind the Curtain PC at gmail.com.
Yeah, if you want to email us.
Yeah, Instagram's the best way to connect with us and see what we're doing, kind of.
And we love hearing from you guys. Again, that's really what we want our episodes to be built around. We want to communicate and interact with you guys, and it gives us something to look like. Yeah, I like the challenge of learning answers for these questions.
Definitely, yeah. Questions are like the funnest thing to get. Like, hey, we like your podcast. What about this question? That's like the best thing ever.
Otherwise, you guys are just going to hear whatever me and Josh want to talk about, and who knows?
Yeah, and forgive us because we're getting into like holiday seasons and stuff like that, so it might get a little slow. Content might trickle out here and there.
We've both been very busy recently, so we're a little behind.
We each have children's and families and all these things, and
work.
I guess we have to work for a living, so
yep.
So this is a fun thing that we get to do. So
well, again, it's a
just
hobby.
Make your checks out to Josh Gilbo, P.O. Box. Yeah. No, but yeah, it's a blessing, and I'm glad we get to do stuff like this, and I'm glad God's given us a passion for knowledge and to learn all these things and pass it on.
I'm enjoying this still. It's fun.
Learn as we go, and it's fun. But yeah.
Okay, well, until next time, you guys.
Happy Hallows Eve.
Yeah. Happy All Saints Day. Whatever you, or if you're Protestant and you don't acknowledge that, lock your doors, turn your lights off.
Lock your doors, go to bed.
Pick a good movie. Have fun.
All right, see ya.